So it costs $450 billion to care for the migrants who invaded our country, and yet they told us $10 billion for a wall was too expensive. Got it.
It's another round of these are not facts, they're just things you made up to justify your feelings. 450 billion is an absurdly high number. It's over half of the US defense budget. That should immediately ring alarm bells that this is all bullshit. So where does the number come from? Well, it comes from this interim report by the Committee on Homeland Security majority, conservative Republicans, airing criticism of the current Department of Homeland Security's leadership. And they state that the cost just to house and care for illegal aliens under the current administration is $451 billion annually. And they cite the source for that number as being the Center for Immigration Studies. So who are they? Well, they're an anti-immigrant think tank, founded and supported by white nationalists, and have been labeled a hate group. Okay, well still, let's look at their study. Except it's not a study, it's a blog article, an opinion piece written by Andrew Arthur. And he, in turn, pulls his numbers from yet another article, which estimated the municipal cost in New York City was $150,000 per migrant per year. He then multiplied that number by the estimated 3 million migrants who have entered the country legally and illegally since Biden took office, and came up with $451 billion. But that number is based off estimates in New York City, one of the most expensive cities in the world. So he then throws out an estimated 30% cost reduction to get a national figure of about $316 billion. So already we have some pretty major holes. It's not 450 billion, it's 316 billion. It's not illegal migrants, it's all migrants. And it's not based on any studies, but it's based on opinion pieces. Now, Andrew pulls the cost from New York from an article written by Real Clear Investigations, who are part of the right-wing leaning Real Clear media group, stating, "I trust their analysis and math more than my own." And if you're familiar with this series, then you know that we call that foreshadowing. So let's check out Real Clear's math. In their article, they quote New York Mayor Eric Adams, stating that the costs are somewhere between $2 to $3 billion a year. They cite this number again later, and then divide that number by the estimated 40,000 illegal migrants that are in New York to get $150,000 per year. There's two glaring problems here. The first is the math is wrong. 3 billion divided by 40,000 people works out to be $75,000 per person, exactly half of what they're claiming. The second is the cost is across all migrants, but they're attributing it to just illegal immigrants, artificially inflating the number per migrant. New York City served an estimated 126,000 asylum seekers and migrants, and that works out to $24,000 per person per year. Across the 3.1 million migrants, that's not 450 billion, it's 75 billion. Okay, so the problem is 6 times smaller, but 75 billion is still a lot of money. So let's talk revenue. When I worked writing tax software, I had to include support for something called an ITIN. If you're a US citizen or a legal resident, you're issued a social security number. It's used to identify you, to claim benefits and welfare, and also used to pay taxes. If you are not a legal resident, then you are still expected to pay taxes, and instead you can be issued an ITIN. And undocumented migrants pay a lot of tax. The Baker Institute published a report doing a cost-benefit analysis of undocumented migrants in Texas, and they estimated that in total, undocumented migrants cost the state about $2 billion a year. However, they also estimated that through consumption taxes, property taxes, and other sources, undocumented migrants bring in $2.4 billion of revenue, a net profit for the state. Not only that, but they also estimated that removing all the undocumented migrants would have a massive economic impact on the state, removing $171 billion from the gross state product, shrinking the state's economy by 10%. And this was replicated by a similar cost-benefit study of Alabama's 2011 legislation cracking down on undocumented migrants, estimating a $10.8 billion reduction in Alabama's gross state product annually. Nationally, just undocumented migrants alone bring in $96 billion in federal and state taxes, which is more than the estimated $75 billion it costs to care for and house all migrants, both legal and illegal. Migration is a net positive in terms of revenue. That alone is reason enough to reject this nonsense. But a $10 billion border wall doesn't even solve the problem. The primary means of entry for undocumented migrants for the last decade are people who enter the country legally through a port of entry and overstay their visas, not people illegally crossing a border. The story told here about immigrants is harmful, racist rhetoric directly fed to you by white nationalists and nativist groups that are relying on you to blindly regurgitate their hate. But the reality is that temporary and permanent migrants are a massive benefit, both to the economy and to their communities.